When I was growing up, we didn't even have language. Nobody used the word gay when I was in school. The language wasn't mainstream. So I was deemed a sissy. And I was picked on and bullied and beaten up. It was physical abuse throughout my entire school years. It was extremely traumatic, but I look back now, all these years later, with gratitude.
Today's guest is all the way from Dallas, Texas, Maddox, a personal power coach, community leader, and host of the Authentic Gay Man podcast. Welcome, Maddox.
Thank you, Anita. I'm very excited to be here.
What's one of the most courageous things you've done? I'm sure there's many, but what is one of the most courageous things you've done?
I would say, and yes, you're correct. There are many, but the thing that's sticking out probably is coming out as a gay man. I know that we all have that story if we're part of the gay community, but I came out 41 years ago in 1981 in a small town in Central Texas. And it was not a friendly place to come out of the closet. It was, and I came out to family, but I didn't come out to the entire community. I came out to close friends around me, but while I lived in that small town, I had to live, I was in the closet basically.
Mm-hmm.
But it perhaps, it's water under the bridge. It's been a long time ago, but yeah, it was probably maybe one of the most courageous things that I've ever had to do.
Yeah, I can imagine, because that's a number of years ago, and that there's still, it's kind of still at this moment in time, there's still a lot of stigma, to be honest, and yeah, that needs to stop. And I can't understand why there is still so much, but there is.
Yes. I hear a lot of gay people make comments about, I'm always having to come out. We have to come out for the rest of our life. There's always this coming out. And I had to take pause when I've heard people say that, because I thought, is that true? Do I experience it that way? And I really don't. I think that, and I think it must have a lot to do with just how comfortable one is in one's own skin. There was a time after I came out where, yes, for a period of time, every time I met somebody new, I had to have this conversation and make this big announcement. And that went on for a period of time. And then there was a time when I realized I didn't really need to make that big announcement. I could just show up and they would figure it out on their own just by the way I showed up. I was a career hairdresser for 40 years, even 40 years. Wow. I retired from the salon at the end of 2019. And the way I learned to navigate that was maybe a client would be sitting in my chair and she would be telling me some story about her husband or her boyfriend. And I would say, my boyfriend does the same thing. I never had to say I'm gay. It was just, I talked about my life the same way straight people talk about their lives. And no one ever batted an eye, because I didn't make a big deal out of it. They didn't make a big deal out of it.
Beautiful. Absolutely love it. And that's the way it should be.
It's 2022, and I live in a big city where, for the most part, I'm completely out of the closet in every respect. There's nobody in my life that doesn't know that I'm gay. I don't act in any manner where I try to pass for straight, as the old saying goes, because, I think that's actually kind of a form of internalized homophobia when we try to act straight or pass for straight.
Absolutely.
So I don't aspire to that.
So you're an empath, and is that how you do your coaching? Tell me a bit more about that, please.
I didn't have a word for it, a term for it, a label for it for many, many years. I mean, I realized at a fairly early time in my life, I mean, certainly not my childhood, and I don't remember exactly when it was. I just knew there was a point when I became aware that I could feel the feelings of other people. I could be sitting over coffee or a meal with a friend in a restaurant, and we could be having conversation about whatever you'd be having conversation about, and they would share something with me, and I would feel this. Sometimes I would feel this intense feeling of emotion, and I knew it wasn't my feelings. And sometimes I would say, this happened a lot of times, actually. I would say, wow, you just had a really big rush of emotion. And most often they would say something like, no, 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 like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And I would stop them and I would say, no, stop. I know what I felt. And then they would pause for a minute and then they would go, wow, you're right. How did you know that? Well, I don't know how I know that. I just know it. I have no idea how I know that. Now, it was many, many, many years later. In fact, it was probably maybe just sometime in the last decade through reading that I was able to identify that I was an empath. When I really, really heard the term and really read it, it just intrigued me. So I read up on what exactly is an empath, and I was like, oh my God, that is me to the letter. And it was really helpful to have a label for it. I mean, we bash labels. We're in a time period in history right now where everybody's like hating labels. We don't want to be labeled. But sometimes there's value in labels. It helped me a lot to understand, because as soon as I was able to see, oh yes, I fit in that category, I'm an empath, then I could study what that meant. And there were books that would help me navigate that and understand how to manage it. I view it as definitely a gift. I know there's a lot of people that don't, because they feel the feelings of so many people around them with such intensity that it just overwhelms them. I feel like it's a gift. And I have studied and learned how to manage all that's coming at me, because, if you feel other people's feelings and you're at a funeral where everybody around you is grieving with real intensity and you feel all that, it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. There have been times when I've been in a personal growth seminar or workshop where people all around me were having really intense stuff come to the surface, and I could feel all of it. And there have been times when it's overwhelmed me, but I just keep coming back and raising my energy and studying and learning to be able to rise to the moment when that comes up, so I don't become overwhelmed. The ability to take it all in, to feel it without absorbing the energy. And that's the key. I was only able to identify that just recently, and working with one of my clients. She's an empath, and I had the awareness that she feels it and she absorbs it. Whereas I feel it and then I can I can feel it, and then the feeling passes. The feeling doesn't pass for her. She absorbs it. And I think that we can learn to navigate that in a manner that, now I'm working with her where she can feel it without absorbing it. But it's definitely a gift.
Yeah. Because how is that different from being intuitive? Because I know you're intuitive too.
Yes, and it took me a little while to kind of understand the difference between the two, that there's kind of this overlap feeling, but the intuitive part feels more like information coming to me. The empath is I'm literally feeling a physical feeling sensation. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling happiness. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling anger. It can come in a lot of different ways, but when I feel somebody else's rush of emotion, it will move me to the degree that sometimes I will literally cry. Whereas with the intuition, it comes more in the form of information or guidance. And I use that a lot in my coaching. I use both. in my coaching. I think that those two gifts, well, in many ways set me apart from coaches that may not have those gifts. It gives me insights into my clients that I would have to find another way to get those insights. So I feel very gifted in that because I am a coach, my ability to get this information, and my clients, they all know, if I say the words, because if I get the intuitive hit, I'll say, I'm getting an intuitive hit right now. Are you interested? I always ask permission. And of course, they always say yes. I've never had anybody say no. I don't want to know what your intuition is. And then I share what's coming through. And it's amazing to me how often they will say, wow, that is spot on, like spot on. And it's not like I'm telling them their future. It's not a clairvoyance. It's not a mind reading thing, or I'm not a medium, but in Intuit, we just get messages. I can't connect with people on the other side. It's nothing like that. Although I would love that. I wish I could. It's more like a download that just feels like I will even say, man, I just had a message hit me like a bolt of lightning hitting the top of my head. It's amazing what comes through. And to the degree that I'm getting new information at the same time the client is getting new information. So sometimes it's something I've never heard or thought about myself. And I can be really like, wow, that is new information, even though it came out of my mouth.
It's definitely a gift. And yeah, sharing it is, I'm sure people want to know. I would want to know things. Yeah.
Well,
definitely.
and I'm also a highly sensitive person. If you're familiar with that term, it's actually a psychological term. And studies say that about 20% of the global population are highly sensitive people. And there's some overlap with that and the empath, but they are two separate things.
Yes, I can imagine having all these, the empath, the intuitiveness. I can imagine being highly sensitive as well. I think that all comes part of it, I would imagine.
Yes. Now, that was something I only discovered about 5 years ago. I was actually working with a therapist, and she suggested that I might be a highly sensitive person and recommended a book, which I did read, and the book had an assessment in it. And there's a degree. You can be slightly highly sensitive, or you can be extremely highly sensitive. I'm probably somewhere in the medium range. But there are definite markers that indicate if you are a highly sensitive person. And I fit into, I had many of the markers that would indicate that.
Okay.
And the beautiful thing about that was in reading the book and understanding what a highly sensitive person was, there was this moment where I went, oh my gosh, I get it. I always had known that I was different in many ways. I was different from the rest of the boys in that I was gay. I was different in that I felt people's feelings and when others couldn't. And this highly sensitive thing, there were a variety of things that set me apart and made me different from other people. And I never understood it. And it was always kind of like, you have something about you that you can't even understand. It makes it challenging. And when I read that book and suddenly saw all the pieces, it was like everything came into focus and I went, oh my gosh, now I get it. And then I could operate from a place of power with that. I could operate from a place of being able to own who I was and being able to embrace it so I could be comfortable in my own skin. And so it's been a journey. A rather lengthy journey, but a beautiful and glorious journey, and sometimes a really, really hard journey.
All of these things have actually played a very large role in your life then. Would you refer to these as gifts?
I would. I wouldn't rid myself of any of them. I mean, they do have their set. Each of them has its own set of challenges. but they play a really, really big role. Each of these things play a really big role in the man that I am today. And I wouldn't be the man that I am today if it weren't for these things, these gifts, and also all of my life's experiences. You know, we all have trauma that we carry. And probably one of the biggest traumas that I've experienced in my life was all of the bullying that I went through as a child. You know, when I was growing up, we didn't even have language. Nobody used the word gay when I was in school. The language wasn't mainstream. So I was deemed the sissy. And I was picked on and bullied and beaten up. It was physical abuse throughout my entire school years. It was extremely traumatic, but you know, I look back now, all these years later, with gratitude. I wouldn't want to relive it. I wouldn't even wish it on my enemy. But I wouldn't, if you could say we could go back and erase that from your experience, I would say no. At this point, no. Because it's contributed to, along with my gifts, the gifts and the traumas, because we all have multiple, some more extreme than the others. They've all defined me. Now, if I were sitting here going, wow, I hate myself, I don't like who I am, then that might not be the case. But I'm at a place in my life where there is a pretty strong sense of self-love. I do really appreciate the human being that I have become. And I think that, I know that came about as a result of the combination of the traumas and the gifts, the hardships and the gifts. And so there's just a lot of gratitude now.
That's absolutely fantastic. It really is. When you can own yourself like that, that is really beautiful. And is that what's made you host the Authentic Gay Man podcast then?
It played a really, really big role in it. I think that I struggled for many years to feel like I was part of my own community. I came out 41 years ago. I announced to the world that I was gay, but I never felt like I fit in the gay community. And through most of my life, the vast majority of my friends have been straight people, male and female. And I've been blessed to have really, really wonderful friendships who love me, accept me exactly for who I am. But I wasn't really part of my own community, wasn't part of the gay community. And I had a couple of gay friends. I had a ton of acquaintances, but they didn't know me and I didn't know them. And that was because I didn't let them know me. It was a safety issue. I had a string of events that happened in the first year of being out that were really, really tough events for me. I was very naive for my age at the time. I was about 24 when I came out. And in my first year, I had multiple experiences of being taken advantage of, being used, abused, disrespected, disregarded. And it was a fatal mistake that I made at that point. I say fatal. I don't know what made me use that word, but fatal in a regard in that there was certainly a part of my life that I killed. So there was fatal. And that was, I came to the conclusion after that year of our hard things that gay men were not safe. And I applied that conclusion to all gay men. And so I withdrew. I didn't let gay men know me. I didn't take the time to get to know them because it felt so unsafe. And it wasn't until maybe about 3 years ago when that all came full circle. I only had 2 gay friends and one of them died 5 years ago from stage 4 cancer. He had stage 4 cancer and he was here one day and gone the next. And it was like, well, hell, I went, half of my tribe just went down. I only had 2 gay friends, and one of them died. So that's 50% of my tribe just went down. And it was kind of a wake up call. I realized that all of my life I had said, I'm not part of the gay community, and I'm really okay with that. I don't have any gay friends. All my friends are straight, and I'm really okay with that. And there was this moment when I realized that that's a lie. You've been lying to yourself. You're not okay. It's not okay with you that you're not part of your community. It's not okay with you that you don't have a circle of gay friends. I had to look at that, and I had to decide what I was going to do with that. And it's the last 3 to 4 years have been a pretty intense journey into that. And when I came to the conclusion or the realization that I had applied that conclusion, that meaning, gay men are not safe, to the entire community, and I realized what that had cost me, I cried uncontrollably. I just cried uncontrollably. I couldn't stop crying when I realized what it had cost me. I mean, I'm 65 years old now. And just in the last couple of years, I'm really starting to secure some really quality, intimate, emotionally intimate friendships with other gay men. I now feel like I am part of my community. And I'm very grateful, because I could have lived my life out and died without figuring this out. So I'm very grateful that I figured it out now, even though I feel like I did miss out on a lot. The better part of 4 decades not being connected to my people. And so that was how the Authentic Gay Man was born, because my journey was, I had lived unauthentically with my community. I had authenticity down with my straight friends. I could fully be myself, just as real and vulnerable. Couldn't do it around gay men at all. And so it's been this really intense last 2 or 3 years of bringing that online. That was the inspiration behind the podcast, because I looked around and I knew I could see a lot of that. I could see others that were living the life that I lived. They had this persona, this social mask that they were wearing, that they wanted people to see them as, but it wasn't their authentic self. And I knew that that was costing them the same way that it had cost me. And so that's the focus of the podcast, is really getting real with ourselves and with our tribe.
That's brilliant, because things like this is needed. That's fantastic.
I was going to say, when I launched the podcast, I mean, the whole premise of the podcast was to bring gay men on as guests, not experts, not celebrities like so many podcasts do, but just to bring on what I call everyday gay men and let them tell their journey, their story. I didn't know if I'd have any takers. This is not something in my experience that we really do in the gay community. We don't talk about our journey. We don't talk about our struggles. We don't talk about things below the surface very often. I mean, I'm generalizing, but in my experience through all of those years, social life in the gay community can be very shallow. I'm not saying it's all that way, but it can be very shallow. And I thought, I don't know. I had found it very, very hard to find men that were interested in any kind of personal growth or awareness work. Yeah, I had a very hard time finding men that wanted to talk about their lives below, what car they drove, or their next vacation to Puerto Vallarta, or and I thought, you may roll this out and you may have no takers, no guests. But that hasn't been the case. It's been actually shocking to me, because men have literally lined up. I have a lengthy list of men waiting for a spot to be on my podcast, to share their story. And that made me realize that I can't speak to women, because I don't know. So I'm going to speak to gay men about gay men. I'm very aware that we have this deep need to be seen, heard, and valued. And so
Absolutely.
that really is what the podcast is about. It's about giving men an opportunity to speak their truth, to share their stories, to get vulnerable, to be authentic, and to be seen, heard, and valued.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I'm so pleased you do have a list of guests to come on. Clearly it's needed. So that's a fantastic job you're doing. Well done.
Well, in the beginning, many of them were people that I knew, but I thought, okay, that list is only going to last for so long. And it was still this thought of, well, these people are doing it because they know me, they love me, they trust me. What happens when I run out of my list of friends? So when I've gone through all of them, but before I could even get there, there were strangers that were lining up, people that we'd even hear about it from one of my friends or one of my guests, people then that were listening to the podcast and reaching out and saying, I'd like to be a guest. So there's no want for guests. They are currently plentiful, and I feel very blessed. I hope that holds up. They're plentiful right now. And it's been very, very exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely that ripple effect, isn't it? Somebody telling someone else and other people coming on. And I always think that's absolutely a fantastic way to do things because it's authentic, being the authentic coach. And
very organic.
Really
yes, very organic. And I love that aspect of it. When we started using this buzzword organic, I knew what organic food was, but when they said grow your audience organically, I'm like, what does that even mean? But I get it now. It's where you put your stuff out there and you're not buying $1 million ads and on all the social media. That's not organic. Organic is where it just naturally people start to show up because they're drawn to what you're doing. And I'm not doing any advertising. I'm all over social media, but there's not a single paid ad. It's me just getting out there and sharing what I'm doing and talking about it. And the organic following is coming. It's pretty exciting. It's very exciting.
Well done. Yeah, I'm sure it is very exciting. That's excellent. Yeah. Because you're a community leader also. Tell me about that. Is that part of it or is that something else that you do?
It's part of it. There's a couple of ways that looks. I started, my work as a hairdresser, and especially in the last many years, was probably 80% female clients and maybe 20% male. So I've always worked with a higher percentage of women over a 40-year period of time. By the time I closed my salon and retired from the industry, I got a PhD in women. I mean, women tell their hairdressers more than they tell their therapist. And if you don't believe that, just ask any woman. She'll tell you, yes, I tell my hairdresser things that I don't tell my therapist. And so I'm not saying every woman, but generally speaking, I know women like I know the back of my hand. I can communicate with them. I get them. And so 2 years ago, I launched an online community for women that were particularly interested in learning to really stand in their own personal power.
Wow.
And while it's a relatively small community, it is, and it's going gangbusters. And when I say gangbusters, it's not going gangbusters in that it's growing really rapidly. That's another story. But it is going gangbusters in what is happening inside the community with the people that are there and are participating is absolutely phenomenal. It has exceeded my expectations. It's exceeded my ability to reach and assist women in their process. I have a lot of passion for it. I love my time with my women. And so I've always done things that had elements of community leadership. But the goal is eventually to do something similar for gay men. Right now, the podcast is my focus because I want to reach many people, have an impact, also want to build an audience. And then there will be my hope, as it unfolds organically, will be that opportune time when I know it's time to share my vision with the world of an online community for men that's something a little bit different than what's mostly out there. So we'll see.
Oh, exciting.
I've cast the net, I've got the vision and I've cast the net, and now it's just a matter of time and continuing to take baby steps.
Exciting times to come then, definitely.
Yes. Feeling very positive and very good about the direction. And also knowing that, there will be bumps in the road that will alter the trajectory from time to time. So I'm trying to be real fluid with it right now.
Best way.
To let it have a life of its own and to let it carry me.
What resources can you share, tools, daily tips for anyone that is at a crossroads, don't know which way to go, whether it's personal, or that, they don't have to be gay here, but if they've got personal relationship and they're not sure, I mean, what would you say to someone, especially as you have the podcast, you have community with the women?
This is a brilliant question, and there's so many things that are floating around in my head right now. I think that community is vitally important. We've all heard the saying, better together. We've all heard the saying, it takes a tribe, or it takes community, it takes a community. And there is truth in all of that. If you don't have a sense of community, and I'm community, I mean, not necessarily blood relatives. I'm talking about family of choice, not family of origin. If your family of origin happens to be a real tribe and they uplift you, they support you, they love you, they accept you, beautiful. But for many of us, that's not our family of origin. The beautiful thing about family of choice is we get to pick the people, hand pick the people that will lift us up, accept us, hold us in love and compassion, do whatever they can to help us believe in ourselves when we struggle to do that. Community is vitally important. So that would be my suggestion. Find your tribe, and there are ways to do that. And one of the most important ways is to work on your own authenticity. The more you show up in life authentically, the more attractive you become to other authentic people. The more you show up in life uplifting others, supporting, accepting, and being compassionate and kind, the more your tribe will just suddenly magically show up around you. I have lived this, so I can speak that. I would say that if you're at this crossroads and you're struggling to know how to move forward personally or professionally, consider hiring a coach. That's what they are trained to do. And coaching is very different than therapy. If you have mental health issues, and I'm not saying you're mentally ill or unstable, that's not it. But if you're having mental health issues, get with a therapist by all means. If you need trauma recovery, that's the first stop, therapy. Coaching is a totally different animal. Coaching is more about really what do you want out of life? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And the who do you want to be is more important than what do you want to do. The what do you want to do will flow from the who do you want to be, but the who you want to be's got to come first. But get with a professional, whether you pick therapy because that's the first route. If there's trauma involved, that should be first. Get with a coach and get some professional help. I can tell you right now, people who work with their coaches, they thrive.
Yes.
They thrive personally. They thrive professionally. It's almost impossible to work with a coach and not thrive. But it's kind of like the gym. You can't buy that membership and then never go to the gym. You can't pay the coach and not do the work. Get with a coach, but you got to be willing to do the work. Buy the gym membership, but you got to be willing to go and do the exercise. They go hand in hand. You can't magically, I saw a meme the other day. It was so funny online. It was something about, I'm going to call and file a complaint. I bought a gym membership and nothing's ever happened. But then the whole gist of it was they'd never actually gone and done anything. They just thought all they had to do was, it was very funny. But, you know, on a deeper level, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong at all by really leaning into self-love. You know, self-love is not sexy. Let's just put it out there on the table. Self-love is not sexy. When we think about love, we want sexy love. And so when you say, focus on your self-love, everybody makes a wrinkle their face up like they've just tasted something really sour. We don't want to look at that because that's not sexy. But I can tell you that the people that don't think self-love is sexy are the people that have never really gone down that path. Because when you put self-love in place, when you start to actively cultivate and work on self-love, and you start to see all that changes about your life, all that attracts and draws into your life, it becomes extremely sexy. So if you're not seeing self-love as sexy, it's just because you don't know any better. It's just a level of, well, ignorance. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that when you come out of the shadows and start to work on self-love, yes, it's going to be challenging in the beginning for many. There will be a point where you'll just clearly see, oh my God, this is really sexy.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. I love it.
It was kind of all over the map, and there's more, but those are the things that really were in the forefront of my mind when you asked me that question.
Love it. Thank you.
We have to do the work.
Yes, absolutely. And
life is a job. Let's just face it. Life is a job. If you took a job and didn't do the work, you wouldn't hold the job for very long. And life is a job. You must do the work.
It's fantastic. Yes. Where can the listeners find you online? What's your website, Maddox?
Well, probably the podcast website is theauthenticgaymanpodcast.com. I'm on, and we'll put this in the show notes because I don't have this off the top of my head, but I have a Linktree account, which will take you to all of my links. And I just don't have that memorized. But
that'll be in the show notes.
You'll
definitely.
be able to, I do have a following of people that are not gay listening to my podcast. I've had many straight folks reach out to me and say, I know that it's called the Authentic Gay Man Podcast, but this is universal stuff. And I said, well, most of it is. You're right. I just am supporting the gay community, but I do have heterosexual listeners who write in and tell me that they're getting a lot out of listening.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Definitely. That's excellent. Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. That was kind of a surprise. This is very flattering.
Something to be learned from everyone. Let's face it.
Yes, we all have a contribution.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing your courageous journey with us today and doing the work on yourself to be able to do that. Like you say, it is about doing the work. By sharing your story, you're helping so many others. So thank you, Maddox.
It's been a complete pleasure to be a guest on your podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much.
Thank you. What is your definition of courage?
I would say that it's to feel the fear and do it anyway. There's actually a pretty famous book entitle that. But, courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. True courage is defining what it is you want. And no matter what fear you feel, choosing to do it anyway. Putting your desire, putting more value on your desire than on the fear.